Okay. So good evening, everybody. Let's generate our motivation. And we're still alive in this human body with the ability to listen to and understand, reflect on, and meditate on the Dharma. And so let's really check our motivation for doing that and place it very firmly within the context of being of benefit to all living beings and in the context of aiming for full enlightenment. And so we generate the bodhicitta, the primary mind, with those two aspirations: to benefit sentient beings and to attain enlightenment in order to do so. And so generate that mind. And even though enlightenment may seem a long way off, we may not have a clear picture of it, still we know it's very different from the confused state we're in right now. And we can imagine a state of peace where our heart and mind feel completely open and receptive, and there's no hesitation or fear, worry, or doubt at all. So think about enlightenment in that kind of way. And then really have in your heart the wish to purify your mind and develop its qualities so that you can become enlightened for the benefit of beings. Last week we were talking about how to meditate on the selflessness of persons. Remember? And so in there was, identifying the object of negation and then establishing the pervasion that if the self existed inherently, it would have to be either inherently one with the aggregates or inherently separate from the aggregates. And that's a very important pervasion to establish. Sometimes we skip over that, but to really think in the context of things being inherently existent, then two things have to be either inherently one, which means totally identical, or they have to be inherently other, which means they have no relationship at all. With regular conventionally existent things, that kind of thing is, they can be conventionally one and conventionally different, that's fine. But if they're conventionally one, they don't have to be one and the same. And if they're conventionally different, they don't have to be, totally unrelated. So it's good to really understand why you have those restrictions if things are inherently existent. Because, inherently existent things don't depend on other factors. Okay? So the lack of dependence on other factors means that if they're one, they're completely one, and if they're different, they're totally different. Okay? Now, something interesting about this meditation is very often it's taught that you are searching for the inherently existent I when you're doing this, and that in the first thing of identifying the object of negation, you identify the inherently existent I, and then you see if that I is one with the aggregates or different from the aggregates. And that's how the meditation is often taught. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when I was discussing with Thupten Jinpa, he was pointing out that actually the way Tsongkhapa describes it is after you've set up, what the object of negation is and then the pervasion, that then you investigate how does the I exist? Okay? So you're just investigating how the I exists. You're not, so this is the conventional I, you're investigating how it exists. Does it exist, as one and the same with the aggregates? Okay? Does it, which it would have to if it were inherently existent. Does it exist totally unrelated to the aggregates, which would have to if it were inherently existent. So it's just a slightly different twist on it, but he was saying that you're actually investigating the nature of the I that does exist and seeing that that nature cannot be inherently existent. Yeah, because the I doesn't, how the I is doesn't match any of the ways that it would have to be if it existed inherently. Okay? So just a slightly different tinge on how you approach that. Okay, so we've talked so far about, if the I were inherently one with the aggregates and the faults that would come about through that. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about if the I and the aggregates were inherently different and totally unrelated. Okay? So if the self, the I, and the aggregates were totally unrelated, then the person would not have any of the characteristics of the aggregates. Okay? So, since the body is, let's say, male and female, if the self and if the person and the body were inherently different and unrelated, then we couldn't say I'm male or female. Okay? Or if the body were sick or well, we couldn't, and and the self and the body were inherently different, then we couldn't say I'm sick or I'm well, because those two things would be completely unrelated, and whatever happened to the body would not happen to the self. So the body could die, that wouldn't mean the self died, because they would be inherently different, unrelated. Okay? Or the mind could be unhappy, but it wouldn't have to mean that we wouldn't say I'm unhappy or I'm happy. Okay, because the two things would be totally unrelated. So that's one fault that would happen if the person were inherently different from the aggregate. Another fault is that you could apprehend them differently. If they're different, then we should be able to see them as being different, which would mean that the body and the mind could be over here, and the person could be over there, and we would see them as two things that are different and unrelated. But we certainly don't do that, do we? When the body and mind is somewhere, that's where the person is. We can't say that the person is somewhere separate from where the body and mind are. Okay, so that shows that they're dependent on each other, they're related. But if they were inherently different, they wouldn't have to be at the same place at the same time. Okay? So, by really thinking about these things, then you see, the person and the aggregates couldn't be entirely separate, and unrelated. But then we think, okay, they're related, and then we somehow go back to, I'm my mind, or I'm my body, So it's very hard finding exactly how the I relates to the aggregate. Because whenever we think of the I, we're always making it inherently existent. Okay? It's hard for us to think of a person that exists by mere name. Okay? So this is what's helpful, and trying to think about dependent arising. It exists by mere name. It doesn't mean that the person is only a name, because a name is a sound and a person isn't a sound. But what it means is that the person exists, only because it's been merely labeled, okay, in dependence on a base. Okay, so the person isn't inherently one with the aggregates. It's not inherently separate with the aggregates. And that's how we do it in the 4-point analysis, or the 4 essential points. Now, Nagarjuna, when he taught, actually pointed out 5 points to investigate what the relationship between the self and the person is. So here, you still identify, instead of it being actually 2 points, either inherently one or inherently different, here there's 5 points. Okay, so the first thing of identifying the object of negation, and then the privation that you do for any of these things. So the first one is called a 4-point analysis, but when you're investigating how the I exists, there's only 2 points. It's either the same or it's different. Okay, so here in 5 points, and actually these 5 points are all subsumed in the 2 points. Okay, but it's interesting to think about the 5 because it just gives us, some idea sometimes about how our mind thinks. So the first one is that the self inherently depends on the aggregates. Yeah, and then the next one is the aggregates inherently depend on the self. Then the self inherently possesses the aggregates. The collection of the aggregates is the person, and then the shape or the arrangement of the aggregates is the person. So those are actually the first 3 that I listed, combined with the first 2 of same and different. Those are the 5 by Nagarjuna, and then if you include the last 2, the collection and the arrangement, those are the 7 by Chandrakirti. Okay, so if we think that the self is inherently dependent on the aggregates, so that gives you the feeling that the aggregates are there first, and then the self kind of depends upon them. Okay, so that would, the analogy that they use sometimes is like the forest with all the trees, and then there's a tiger roaming in the forest. So the tiger really depends on the forest. Yeah? And so sometimes that's the way we feel about the relationship between the self and the person. The aggregates are like the forest, all these different things, and then I, this real I, is somehow roaming amongst those aggregates, depending upon them, And so if we watch our sense of I, sometimes it's like that. It's like, I'm walking. No, I'm feeling happy. No, I want. No, I'm this and that. I'm seeing. And so we often have that feeling as if the I is wandering amongst the aggregates, attaching to different ones in different times, okay? But you can see that kind of way of viewing the person is essentially falls under the same thing of seeing the person and the aggregates as inherently separate. Okay, because the forest and the tiger are different entities. Okay, then the aggregates being inherently dependent upon the self, that gives you the feeling that first there's a self, and then the aggregates kind of fill it in. Yeah, and so the example for that is Jeffrey's example is how margarine covers the whole piece of bread, you know, or mayonnaise covers the whole salad. So the mayonnaise or the margarine is like the self, and then your salad or your bread, you know, kind of fills it in. I just was thinking it's also kind of like having a framework for a puzzle, and then putting the puzzle piece and the framework for the puzzle and the puzzle pieces. You know, that same idea, that somehow first there's a self, and then the aggregates depend on the self. You know, the aggregates kind of fill it in some way. So again, this is coming back to the thing of the self and the aggregates being different. So it comes under the different thing again. Yeah. Then the fifth one is the self inherently possesses the aggregates. So then possession can either be the way a person possesses an ear or the way a person possesses a dog. So if you're analyzing the relationship that the self possesses the aggregates, then that's kind of like the person possesses the ear. So they're kind of thinking of them as inherently one. And then, or if you're thinking again of possession, the person, you know, possessing the dog being the aggregates, meaning that they're separate entities. Okay? And so again, you come back to, if you've refuted them being one and you've refuted them being different, then the self can't inherently possess the aggregates either. Then the next one is the collection of the aggregates is the person. This one's a little bit trickier, you know, because we have this idea of a gestalt, you know, things come together and something new is there that wasn't before, which is true, but we make that new thing inherently existent. Okay? That that it's really inherently the whole inherently is more than the sum of its parts. Okay, so here our idea is that the whole collection of the aggregates is the person. You know, one. You know, somebody may say, well, yeah, it's clear that the person isn't one aggregate. Because if the person were the body, then we couldn't say I'm thinking. And if the person were the feelings, then we couldn't say I'm walking. So it's clear that, you know, the self isn't the same as any particular aggregate, but maybe it's one with the collection of the aggregates. That sounds good, doesn't it? That sounds quite reasonable. Yeah? I am the collection of my aggregates. Sounds good. But the problem is that a collection is just a group of individual things. It's nothing more than a group of individual things. So if none of those individual things is the person, how could a group of non-persons, when you put them together, become a person? It's like if we have 5 oranges out here, okay, and we put the 5 oranges in a basket, so there's a collection of oranges, does that make an apple? No. So why would a collection of the 5 aggregates, none of which are the person, why would a collection become a person? Doesn't make any sense. Okay? We would kind of like it to make sense, but this is the whole thing, that when you analyze kind of the things we like and the things we assume aren't the way things actually are. Okay. Then the seventh one was that maybe the shape or the arrangement of the aggregates could be the self. Because another fault with, if we just go back to the self being the collection of the aggregates, if we go back to the analogy of the car, if you just have the collection of the parts, do you necessarily have a car? You know, if everything's just piled up together, you don't necessarily have a car. So in the same way, just having a body and a mind somewhere and calling them a collection doesn't necessarily mean there's a person there. So then we might say, oh, but it's the shape that is the person, okay? Or it's the arrangement of all the parts that make it the person, okay? Now, the difficulty with it is that if we say the shape is the person, well, only the form aggregate, the body, has shape. So then you know, the person couldn't have a mind because only the body has a shape. So if you say the shape is the person, then, you know, that shape is the person doesn't need to have a mind. That doesn't make much sense. Okay? Or, again, if you have each part of the body, none of the parts of the body alone form the shape of the person. So again, why would an accumulation of things that are, each of which is not the shape of the person, when you put them together, become a person? It's the apples, the oranges making an apple again. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so when you go through these different ones, and Jeffrey's book, Emptiness Yoga, is good. You know, he kind of goes through these more and pulls them apart more. So it's a very good reference for this. But to really spend some time thinking about it, because when you do, you find like just how sneaky this feeling of I is. Yeah, and it comes in all sorts of different ways, but we're really sure it's there one way or another, kind of hiding out in the aggregates, but we can't really find it. Yeah, and we should be able to if it's there. Okay, so you know, we do this kind of analysis with ourself. Yeah, what we mean by self. We also can do it with people that we're attached to. You know, you think of somebody you're very attached to, and well, who are they? Are they their body? Are they their mind? Yeah, is it their body that I'm so attached to? Then, you know, then I should be attached to their corpse, because that's their body. Yeah. We're clearly not attached to their car. Are we attached to their mind? They have such a beautiful mind. Well, which mind? The mind that's angry? We're not attached to that mind in the other person. Yeah. The mind that's ignorant, we're not attached to that one either. The mind that sees color and shapes, are we attached to their visual consciousness? You know, when you start really looking, where is this person that seems so desirable? It becomes very hard to actually pinpoint. Yeah? Then you say, well, it's just all of them all together. So then we're back at the thing of the collection being the person. But none of the things individually are the person, so how could the collection be the person? Yeah, and if none of the things individually are so desirable, how can you put them together if they're inherently existent and find something desirable? Okay. so when we look for the person and we can't find the person as either inherently one or inherently separate from the aggregates, then we draw the conclusion that therefore the person does not inherently exist. So you don't just leave it with, I can't find the person in the aggregates, I can't find the person separate from the aggregates. You have to come to the conclusion that because it's not either inherently one or inherently different, therefore the person does not inherently exist. And at that time, then you focus on the lack of inherent existence of that person. Now, does that mean that the person doesn't exist at all? No. Okay? Just because we can't find the person when we do ultimate analysis, it doesn't mean that the conventionally existent person doesn't exist. Because remember we were talking before, and the purview of ultimate analysis is just things that exist ultimately, inherently, independently. But that mind cannot say anything about whether things exist conventionally or not, because that's not what's within its purview. In the same way that the visual consciousness cannot ascertain whether the sound of the bell is there or not, because the sound is not in the purview, it's not in the domain of the visual consciousness. So similarly, the mind that does ultimate analysis, this probing awareness that's looking, and seeing, asking how does something really exist, that mind the domain of that mind is not conventionally existent things. Okay, it's looking for an inherently existent things, and when it can't find them, it only finds its emptiness. Okay, but it can't negate the conventionally existent object. Okay, so then what is this conventionally existent object? Because it's so hard for us, because in our perception, the inherently existent and conventionally existent one are completely mixed together. So much so that that's why we don't even think or of ourselves as, apprehending inherent existence, because the things are so mixed together that when we see something, it appears truly existent, we grasp it that way. Nothing is new, okay? We don't even question how things appear to us, let alone how we apprehend them, how we grasp them. Okay, so that's why it's hard for us, and we tend to think, okay, either the person inherently exists, or if it doesn't inherently exist, it doesn't exist at all. And so there we have those two extremes that we're trying to be free of, that it inherently exists. That's the extreme of absolutism or eternalism or permanence. And if it doesn't do that, then we swing to the other extreme, that it doesn't exist at all. And that's the extreme of nihilism, annihilation. Okay? And so this is, very often the way our mind goes. It's all or nothing. It's either really there or there's nothing there. Okay? Both of those are unrealistic extreme views. The person doesn't exist in either of those ways. Okay? And so when we talk about the middle way view, it's not like we're taking the two extremes and averaging them and coming out with the middle. Okay? It's not like that. The middle way view has nothing to do with either of the extreme views. So it's not in the middle of those two views. It has nothing to do with those two. But it's in the middle in the sense that we're not going to either of those two extremes. Okay? Yeah, don't think that you put nihilism and eternalism together and then average it and cut it in half. It doesn't work that way. Okay? So, when we talk about the person existing, how does the person exist? It exists dependently. Yeah? It exists dependently. It doesn't exist with some findable essence, some inherent characteristics that it has all by itself, independent of everything else. Okay? It just exists dependently. It exists on the level of appearance, but it doesn't exist on the ultimate level, because if it did, then the mind of ultimate analysis should be able to find it. So it just exists on the conventional level of appearances. Okay? Conventional, level means the nominal level. Yeah, the level of existence in which things exist by being merely named, that's all. Yeah, that they're dependent upon term and concept. So they exist as appearances. Yeah. Now, things appear to us to exist inherently, but that's not how they actually exist. So just on the level of appearances, they appear truly exist, but that's not the way they exist. So we say things do not exist in the way they appear. Okay, they don't exist in the way they appear. They exist like illusions, yeah, in the sense that they don't exist the way they appear. Okay, it's in that sense that we say that things are like illusions. We don't say that things are illusions. Okay, because an illusion, something that is an illusion, doesn't exist, does it? It can't really function. So things are not illusions that are, like that, but they're like illusions in the sense that they appear one way, but they don't exist in that way. Okay. So when you do meditation on emptiness, there's the meditation time, which is called space-like meditation. And then there's the subsequent attainment time, when you come out of the meditation on emptiness, and at that time you practice seeing things as like illusions. Okay. Now, let's look at these two kinds of things. So the space-like meditation, yeah, why is it called space-like? Yeah, His Holiness was talking about this when we were recently in New York. And he was saying that space is the lack of obstructability. Yeah, when we're talking about the permanent space, it's just a lack of obstructibility. We can't identify that space with any kind of positive attribute, saying, there it is, with some kind of positive identifiable characteristic or attribute. The only way we can identify space is it's the absence of obstructibility. So space is what we call a non-affirming negative. Okay? It's negating obstruction, but it's not affirming anything else at all. So it's known completely by the process of negating something without affirming or implying anything else. Okay? So emptiness is like that too, because it's the mere lack of inherent existence. No other kind of existence, nothing else is being implied. So emptiness is like space in that it is a non-affirming negative. There's no positive characteristic or attribute that we can identify and say, oh, look, emptiness is red in color, or emptiness is, purple, or it's big, or it's, you can see it go over here. No, emptiness can't be identified in any of those ways. It's only a negative process by what is not there. Okay. Now, in the case of space, what is not there is obstruction. In the case of the emptiness, what's not there is inherent existence. Okay? So when we talk about emptiness, we're just talking about a non-affirming negative. That's why it's called space-like meditation on emptiness. Yeah. Now, when a great meditator, has gotten done with that, and they come out of their meditation session. So this is happening repeatedly, because somebody who meditates on emptiness does this repeatedly. So each time they come out of their meditation session, then, and let's say somebody has realized emptiness, whether it's inferentially or directly, when they come out of their meditation session, then they have all the appearances of things again. While they're in their meditation session, with the direct perception of emptiness, there's absolutely no appearance other than emptiness. Yeah, when we say in the Heart Sutra, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, all the no-no-nos there, what that's referring to is when a bodhisattva is in meditative equipoise on emptiness, that directly perceives emptiness, path of seeing or higher, there's only the appearance of emptiness, which appears through this negative process. There's no appearance whatsoever of any kind of conventional object that has characteristics and attributes, anything positive that can be identified. So when you're meditating on the self does not, when you're meditating on the emptiness of the self, okay, the self, if you've gotten somewhere, the self doesn't appear to your mind at that time. If you're meditating on the emptiness of the car, only the emptiness of the car appears to your mind. The car doesn't appear. Okay? So it's not that here's the car, you're meditating on emptiness. Here's this car, and then here's the emptiness of the car. No. Okay? Because you've analyzed to find out how this car exists or how this person exists. You can't find it anywhere. There is only the absence of the inherently existent car, the inherently existent person, whatever it is. Okay? No positive thing is appearing to the mind at that time. So it's like space, right? When you come out of that meditative equipoise and your other senses start functioning again, because in the meditative equipoise only, your mental consciousness is functioning, and it's a very refined mental consciousness. When you come out of that meditative equipoise, then all your senses are functioning. You're seeing cups and telephones and glasses and cats and, bowls and cameras and all sorts of things around you. But they don't appear to you, or put it this way, they still appear truly existent to you. But you know that appearance is false. Okay? So you still, because of the latencies of true existence or inherent existence, you still have the appearance of true existence. But because your mind has just been meditating on emptiness, and that feeling that you had of, whoa, it's not there, when you're meditating on emptiness, hasn't faded. But then when you're walking around all day, these things are appearing, and you see, they're appearing truly existent, but you know that they don't exist that way. Okay? So that's what it means to have illusion-like appearances in your break time between meditation sessions. It's very important to understand this properly, because sometimes people say, illusion-like appearances, that's like, that's like, what's the word? Dissociating. Yeah? Yeah, when you dissociate. No, it's not like dissociating. Or they think when you have all sorts of chaotic experiences, things are there and then they're gone and they're flashing and they're, coming and they're decomposing and things like that. And people say, that must be illusion appearances. No, that's not either. Okay? Or I know sometimes, like if I go see a movie, which I don't do very often in the cinema, when I come out, everything seems rather strange, you know, because you've just been involved in something else. But that feeling of strangeness, that's also not illusion-like appearance. Yeah? So don't just think, oh, because things don't appear the way they usually do, that means that you've realized emptiness and you're having illusion-like appearances afterwards. Yeah? You see, this, I think, is really the value of when people study about this. Then, when they have an experience in meditation, they can say, oh, does it match the description or not? You know, because often people will have an unusual experience in their meditation, and they'll say, oh, I realized emptiness. Because anything that's unusual is called, I realized emptiness. But if you've studied and you know that emptiness is a non-affirming negative, then you know that, you know, if you had this feeling of being outside your body and looking down on your body, you realize that that's not an experience of emptiness. Okay? Or if you have an experience of, you know, I am the universe, you'll know that's not the experience of emptiness. Okay? Or you'll know that if you have a vision of a deity, and even that deity absorbing into you, and you feel the deity's there, you'll know that that's not the experience of emptiness. Emptiness is a non-affirming negative, and if you've directly realized it, nothing else is appearing to the mind, you know. Okay, so then somebody might think, well, when I fall asleep, you know, then I'm realizing emptiness. If you're a very refined tantric practitioner, that might be possible. But for the rest of us, our minds aren't really very alert when we're asleep, are they? And so similarly, you know, people have some experience and, you know, and then they come out and then the world seems a little bit chaotic, or colors are flashing, or things are appearing and disintegrating, and they think, oh, these are illusion-like appearances. No, that's not it. Yeah, illusion-like appearances is, you know, things still appear truly existent, but you know, because of your apprehension of emptiness that hasn't yet left you, you know those appearances are false. Okay, and it's in that way that things are like illusions. Yeah, they appear one way, but you know they don't exist that way. Okay, so an analogy is, you know, when we look in the mirror, we see a face in the mirror. When we're children, we think it's a real face, and we try and play with the baby in the mirror. When we're adults, we know that that face appears, and it appears pretty real, doesn't it? But we know that's a false appearance. Yeah? But you can see, even sometimes people forget it's a false appearance, and when they get mad at themselves, they throw something at the mirror, or when they like themselves, they kiss the mirror. So even we're adults, we forget. Yeah? Okay. So these are some things that are important to remember and to understand. It's also important to know that that it's not that things are empty of inherent existence sometimes, and other times they're truly existent, you know, or they're inherently existent. So it's not like they're inherently existent, but when I meditate on emptiness, then they become empty. Okay, so our meditation is not making anything empty. It's not transforming. It's not changing the way things exist. Things are already lacking in true existence. They already don't have any kind of identifiable essence or objectifiable locus. They already don't have that. When we realize emptiness, we're just realizing what actually already is. So we're not destroying inherently existent phenomena. And we're not changing things from being inherently existent to being empty of inherent existence. Okay? Things are as they have always been. We're just seeing how they are instead of seeing everything in our very ignorant way. Okay? So that's important to understand. And also, it's not that emptiness is something that is beyond the domain of our mind. It's just something imperceivable. You know, emptiness is an object that can be known by the mind. Okay, it's not perceivable by our sense consciousnesses. That's definite. Okay, because there's I think it's in Shantideva in chapter 9, he says, emptiness is not an object of consciousness. And then people say, oh, emptiness, you see, it's not an object of consciousness. It's not a knowledge object. It's not a phenomena. It's, the mind can't know it. And so then they get all sorts of weird views, like emptiness is non-existent, or it's some absolute that can never be known by the mind. All that's wrong. Okay? Emptiness cannot be perceived by our sense consciousnesses because it's not a positive thing, and our sense consciousnesses see color and shape and sound and smell and taste and tactile things, all those things with positive attributes. Emptiness isn't any of them. So our sense consciousnesses can't perceive emptiness. That's what that quote in Shantideva means. Okay? But that doesn't mean that emptiness cannot be known by our mind. It can be known by our mental consciousness. It can't be known by our ordinary mental consciousness that's full of thoughts and all kinds of other stuff and distractions. It's known directly, in any case, by what's called a yogic direct perceiver. So that's a special kind of mental consciousness that is, has a special kind of object, the emptiness of true existence. So emptiness is an object, it is a phenomena, it can be perceived, but only by certain kind of consciousnesses, not by any of our ordinary consciousnesses. Okay? And also, it's not that realizing emptiness makes us weird or makes us not fit in with other people. Okay? Because we might think, if everybody else thinks things are so real, everybody else agrees that so-and-so is a jerk and that, this is right, and, we have all these opinions and we feel like we belong because everybody agrees with our perceptions. And then might come some fear of, oh, well, if I see things as like illusions, or if I don't see them as having any inherent essence, then I'm not going to fit in with anybody, and, they're going to think I'm weird because they're going to say, there's the cup, and I'm going to go, no, there's no cup there. No, that's not the way it is, okay? Yeah, and when you understand emptiness, if you understand correctly, then you realize there's still a cup there, and you can still drink out of the cup, but you realize that the cup doesn't exist as it appears, okay? But you can still function in the conventional world when you've realized emptiness. And in fact, you function better because you're not grabbing onto everything as truly existent. So you're not getting so attached, and you're not having so much rejection, you're not getting so bummed out, And so the mind is just much more balanced and even and equanimous because it's not being like a yo-yo all the time. Okay? So, it's good to have some idea that, realizing emptiness isn't going to make you a weirdo so that you don't fit in with anybody. Okay? Because then we think, oh, well, then, because we desperately want to fit in, don't we? We don't want to be odd and not fit in with all these other sentient beings. So then we think, well, I better stay deluded because that's the only way I can fit in. But yeah, right, we've already done that. And, who wants to stay deluded? Okay. So this is actually, I find this actually a very good thing, if I can just diverge from the topic for a minute. When you're getting attached to another sentient being, to think that sentient being's under the influence of afflictions and karma. Are they an object that is worthy for me to get attached to and take refuge in? Because when we get attached to somebody, we really take refuge in that person, don't we? You are so wonderful, I'm going to do whatever you say, you love me, da 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 da. We take refuge in. But here's another being, who has incorrect perceptions, who has mistaken perception, who has, wrong views, who has erroneous mental states, who's under the sway of afflictions and karma. Are they a suitable object of refuge? No. So why in the world are we getting so attached to them? It doesn't make very much sense. Yeah, at least, we should be attached to somebody who doesn't have any attachment. We shouldn't be attached to anybody, if we want our own mental well-being. But, to be attached to an ordinary being who dwells in the midst of samsaric confusion, what are we going to get out of that? Yeah, a lot of suffering, right? Exactly. Yeah, you have suffering attached to suffering, and it begets suffering. Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions, maybe answers. Yeah.
I don't know if this is just a thing about language, but when you talk about things being just mere appearances, then the question comes, how is it that things that are mere appearances can function? And I understand it when you explain it, that things couldn't function if they weren't empty, but when I just think about a mere appearance functioning, those words don't even make sense.
Right. Okay, so the question is, if things are just mere appearances, how can a mere appearance function? Okay? When you look in the mirror and there's a face there, okay, we're working with an analogy here, there's an appearance of a face. Is there a real face? No. There's just a mere appearance of a face. Can that reflection serve a purpose? Yeah? Yeah. You can pick your pimples and, whatever you're going to do. Yeah, put on your lipstick. So even something that is just a false appearance can function. Yeah? There's no face in the mirror, but the reflection functions. Okay? So, it's in the same way. When you look inside a TV set, it looks like there's people in that TV set. Or you look on a computer screen, it looks like there's people right there in front of you. Okay? There's no real people there. There's just the appearance of people. Can that appearance function? Yeah. Because, you watch a movie or you watch the news and you get information, all sorts of emotions arise and so forth. Okay. On the other hand, if things weren't just appearances, if they had some real essence, it would be very difficult for them to function because they would be independent of everything else. Okay? In which case, nothing could relate to them. They couldn't be even apprehended.
At the
beginning, I didn't understand the new view that Thupten Jinpa was giving.
Oh, okay.
What Tsongkhapa said about how to go through the steps. It sounded the same as what
Okay.
we learned before.
Okay, so what I was saying at the beginning, okay, is that usually the meditation is taught that you're searching for the inherently existent person. But Jimpa was saying, actually, you're inquiring into how the person exists.
Conventionally? Or
No, it's just how does the person exist?
open the question.
Yeah, and you're investigating with ultimate analysis. Okay, so it kind of amounts to the same thing, but it's coming at it from a slightly different perspective. You know, the person me that exists, how does that exist? Does it exist as something that is findable under ultimate analysis? If it does, then it should be either inherently one and the same with my aggregates or inherently different from them.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Question online.
Okay?
Is the conviction that things do not exist the way they appear, that in that way they are illusory-like, is that state enlightenment?
Okay, so is the conviction that things are like illusions and they don't exist the way they appear, is that state enlightenment? No. Okay? A Buddha has a simultaneous perception of both the ultimate truth, which is emptiness, and the conventional truths, which, you know, are things conventionally appearing objects. So only the Buddha can perceive objects as well as their emptiness at the same time. So just having illusory appearances and thinking that they don't exist the way they appear, that, that alone is not Buddhahood. Okay? And also, the Buddha has no mistaken appearances from the side of the Buddha. The Buddha, because he has clairvoyance, apprehends our mistaken appearances. But the Buddha, him or herself, when perceiving something, doesn't have the perception or appearance of inherent existence. Because that perception or appearance is a cognitive obscuration, and a Buddha has eliminated all cognitive obscurations. Okay? Other questions? Yeah.
So would it be accurate to say that doing the meditation on emptiness on a cushion by the methods that have been described, and then off the cushion see things as illusion-like, that if you keep doing that, what you're doing is breaking down this predisposition to see things so inherent all the time.
Okay, so if you're doing your meditation on your cushion, trying to perceive emptiness directly, and then you're off the cushion are practicing seeing things as like illusions. So is that helping to break down the tendency to perceive things as inherently existent? Yes. Yeah, quite definitely it does. So even though we may not have realized emptiness, in the break time, we can still practice seeing things as like illusions or as like dreams, not as dreams and not as illusions, but as similar to those things. Okay? And so sometimes even thinking, even though we don't have any real understanding of what it means, sometimes just thinking, oh, it's only an appearance to my mind, oh, it just is like a dream. Sometimes just thinking like that can really help our mind relax. It's like, oh, I don't have to make this so concrete. So even though we haven't perceived emptiness, we don't really understand what we're saying, still thinking that way intellectually can help us relax a little bit. Okay? But we shouldn't go to the other extreme of saying it is a dream, okay, because then we might actually hurt somebody thinking that they're a dream person, and a dream person doesn't experience any pain, but a conventionally existent person does. So things are not a dream, they are not an illusion. Okay, so, but what's good to do, you know, while we're walking around, if we're going to train an illusion like perception, you know, because how is it that things don't exist the way they appear? Is they appear independent, they exist dependent. So it can be very effective as you're walking around to look at things and start dissecting them into their different parts, into their causes, okay, into the, you know, the base of the designation and the designated object. And so by practicing seeing how things are dependent, that really begins to break down the false, or the false appearance, the mistaken appearance of true existence. Okay, so it's not that you imagine things as like illusion, and so you blur your eyes, and things. Oh yeah, there's two tarpas out there, or or you imagine tarpa just disintegrating and something like, not like that. Okay, where you're just playing with your mind and playing with your perception, but this is really where you're saying, oh, something came from causes, It's dependent on causes. Can it have its own essence if it came from causes? Or something is just a bunch of parts. Why am I thinking that there's something real in there aside from the collection of parts? Okay? And so really starting to question our perceptions. That's what's going to help a lot in the break time. Okay, not doing funny spaced out things, okay, but really investigating, inquiring, questioning our perceptions. Okay. And so, of course, a very good way to start on that is in the gross way of, when somebody appears so beautiful to us, to really say, do they have that beauty? Or when somebody appears so obnoxious to us, say, do they have that obnoxious quality? Or when we're sure somebody's doing something for a particular reason, to say, are they really doing that for that reason? Okay, so this is that's even grosser ways that we have of starting to question, because there we're really questioning our interpretation. We're not even getting at how the things appear to us. Okay.